You're listening to Toronto's #1 real estate podcast, powered by Watson Estates. The most successful local real estate investing starts right here, right now. Here's your host, broker, investor, and social media influencer, Bradley Watson.
Good morning, investors. Bradley here from Watson Estates, and today is October 8th, 2020. It's a beautiful day to talk about our favorite subject, Toronto real estate. You're listening to the largest, fastest growing podcast for that subject on iTunes, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. And in the last couple days, we've seen article after article talking about the September stats for the Toronto local market and the GTA. Well, we're going to dive into those ourselves today. Did we just have the biggest September ever? And our condo listings continuing to surge. There's this divergence that's happening in these different markets. It's brand new, and we didn't know about it. Well, unless you've been listening to our podcast, we're going to talk a little bit about what's going on in that space as well. And then we're going to wrap up with how will the second wave affect our city. If you haven't already, make sure you get on our investor list. We're continuing to send out power of sale deals, high cash flow deals. And these properties, they go quick once we've popped them up because we're talking 15% cash flow per year. We're talking tens of thousands of dollars off the price of the market value on some of these properties. Make sure you jump down in the comments below. You can click the link and just put your name and your email and you'll get those as well. And all right, before we get going here, so we start off with some news. We've got a Liberal promise being fulfilled. Let's go. In 2021, single-use plastic ban includes grocery bags and takeout containers. Well, there you go. The end is coming for grocery bags, straws, and cutlery after a federal government announced today, this is yesterday, which single-use plastics will be covered by a national ban coming into effect next year. The regulation to introduce the ban will be finalized at the end of 2021. So in commemoration of those swagged up turtles in the middle of the Pacific, today, we're going to make fun of plastic. We like to have some fun here as we go and we dive into some of the news. At least I like to have some fun. So welcome to Plastic Surgery Addicts Anonymous, ladies and gentlemen. I'm seeing a lot of new faces in the crowd today, and I must say, I'm rather disappointed. Plastic surgery used to be a taboo subject, but now you mention Botox and no one even raises an eyebrow. All right, guys, you probably have seen the news. September was a fantastic month for real estate, for prices and for sales. And we kind of gave you guys a bit of heads up as that was coming around. But we're going to jump into the articles that rose to the surface. I went through a bunch of them to try and summarize what is the real news, what happened in September. Well, here we go. Starting with ctvnews.ca, the real estate market in the GTA just had its biggest September ever amid the COVID-19 pandemic. Quote, it's called kind of crazy COVID times, according to Heather Johnson, who is in the midst of selling her home in Etobicoke and has had a high number of showings. I did expect it to be crazy, but I didn't expect it to be this crazy. There's a lot of inventory out there right now. Well, then you don't listen to our podcast. According to the Toronto Real Estate Board, September 2020 sales were, here's the numbers, guys, the clickbait titles, sales up 42.3%. 40%. Damn. The average price of all homes in the GTA is up 14% from the same time last year. Damn. What pandemic? TREB President Lisa Patel says the rise is likely due to pent-up demand from the lockdown last spring meaning this past spring. The focus of that demand is on detached homes and the potential that the pandemic is inspiring some people to leave downtown. With regards to that pent-up demand, we're also seeing a little bit more interest in the 905 markets. And this is very much the storyline of all these articles, as it seems that the 905, the low-rise segment, is doing really well. But a lot of them don't want to talk about the condos. We're not going to go there. In general, we've seen 40% increases. We've seen 14% increases in price. But let's not talk about the condos. Quote, other parts of the economy are clearly still struggling, but real estate has just ripped road back to better than it was before, he said. Never heard that expression, but all right, ripped some road. The interest in detached homes in the 905 area may be having an effect on the rental market in Toronto. Quote, if you look at the condo market in downtown Toronto, there's still some interesting things starting to happen there because supply is coming online. Ooh, scary. Supply is coming online. That sounds horrifying. The number of rental listings are up 147% from 2020. That's crazy, guys. The rental listings is really the big driver as we kind of get into the condo space. The average rental price has dropped 10.9% overall and 14% in Toronto. And we've seen certain regions in the past couple of months, that have seen up to 20% drops. Woo! Urban Nation says the decline in rent price is the largest since they began collecting data in 2010. All right, there's one article. Grabbing some highlights from some of the other ones. The Star highlighted the detached home space in Toronto saw a 28% increase in sales and a 9.4% in price. But when we look at the 905, they were up 63% in sales and 16.9% in price. If the 905 didn't exist and we were simply looking at the Toronto market in any year, we would say we had a phenomenal month. 28% increase in sales, almost 10% increase in price. But because the 905 is doing so well, it outshines Toronto, and therefore Toronto sucks, right? The relatively better supplied condominium apartment segment experienced a comparatively slower pace of growth. Again, imagine guys, that we were just in a regular year, that COVID wasn't happening. We weren't comparing the 905 to Toronto. Listen to these numbers. Condo sales in the 905 are up 32%. But even in Toronto, sales are up 7%. That's not bad. Like, it's not like we're like dropping, but people are acting like we say nothing bad about the housing market, right? It's like, it's against your religion. Like, I can't say anything bad. Our culture, we fight over so many issues, but when it comes to housing, we all agree everything is perfect, right? Oh, and plastic is bad. We all agree on that. Even the church agrees on that. Even the Catholic Church banned plastic bags from its premises. They consider them to be sacrilegious. The most negative news, funny enough, for all of you real estate haters out there, I hate the real estate professionals. I love real estate, but I hate the people who sell real estate. Well, I'll tell you what, the most negative news I've seen today when I'm going through all of these web sources, and I'm sure there'll be more negative come online soon. Don't you worry, you bears out there. But it comes from Treb, their market watch. It seems that the negative is this, seasonal adjustment. We got to dive a couple layers deep into a seasonal adjustment stat in order to get some negativity here. So here's what happens. When we look at the total residential sales, residential transactions compared to September of 2019, it's up 42%, which we kind of know that. It's up, right? But when you compare it against August, so last month, August 2020, and we adjust for seasonality, then we're down 5.3%. And what's the reason for that? Well, of course, August was smoking hot. That was pretty much when I threw in the towel. If you remember the August update, I'm like, guys, if we're going to call it bottom here, it should have happened. It really should have happened. And it didn't in August. August was super hot. And meanwhile, September is generally a pretty good month. It's normal. So we're comparing against seasonally, September should be better. So if we don't see much increase in price or sales activity, no change month over month, naturally, this month wouldn't come off as good seasonally as last month. And back when August numbers came out, that was, if you remember, that was when I was like, okay, if you're going to call a drop, it should have happened, no? So I don't like the idea of a moving target. So I'm going to just stick with the fact we're going to have an outstanding winter, and I'm just going to sit on that hill for a little while until something proves me wrong. Meanwhile, if you want negative selling price and you're like, oh, I'm going to find myself a deal. Here we go. All right. Again, look no further than the Toronto Real Estate Board. The average selling price year over year, yes, it's up 14%. But when we seasonally adjust from August of 2020, there's a discount. Ooh, imagine if you sent out an email. I sent out like a real estate publication. Guys, just so you know, seasonally adjusted, we have big discounts here in the GTA. Prices are down in all housing segments by 3.4% month over month. Now's the time. Get on in. But obviously that doesn't happen because seasonal adjustments are kind of useless. Are we even in any season at all? The season still exists, but maybe we're starting to see some silence, a little bit of quieting happening into September. I don't know. But Treb's the one that told us that. Nobody else is even talking about it. Now, when we look at total new listings, you'd think, okay, well, if inventory is rising and we don't have these sales happening, that would bring prices down and vice versa, right? We got not enough listings coming on. Meanwhile, we got activity happening, tightens our market. Well, let's look at those. New listings are up 30.8%, which would be bad, right? Like we had 30% increase. That's not good. But when we compare it to sales were up 42%. So naturally, we have the sales to new listing ratio increasing from what was 50% last year to now 54%. What does that mean? Well, as soon as we cross 60%, we are now entering seller's territory. And don't forget, this includes all housing types. And we know not every housing type is created equal right now. One of the things that I look at as well that's quite interesting, when I look at a chart that was released looking at the MLS sales, I noticed the last 3 months, July, August, and September, sales don't seem to be increasing much in those months. I think that's important. We don't have a rising amount of sales, but we also don't see a declining months of sales. It just seems to be pretty much flat. Now, as it relates to new listings, I do see a slight creeping up of new listings from June, July, August, September. It's been kind of climbing. And so things we need to be watching out for. But we have seen ridiculously high sales from July to September, but it hasn't changed a whole lot up or down. Here's a quote from the chief market analyst, Jason Mercer at Treb. On a GTA-wide basis, market conditions tightened in September relative to last year, with sales increasing at a faster pace than new listings, with competition between buyers increasing noticeably. Double-digit year-over-year price growth was commonplace throughout the region in September, resulting in the overall average selling price reaching a new record. New record, right? Condos and freeholds are like plastic buckets and metal buckets. They both do the trick, but one pales in comparison. Okay, so moving on to our next topic. I want to talk about condos specifically because this is the news. This is really what should be the news. This should be the top articles, but of course it gets hidden by the big stats. Well, let's remove the bell curve and look at condos more specifically. Bloomberg.com reads, condo listings surged 215% in signal of downtown Toronto weakness. Did you hear this in the other articles? Toronto weakness? What? Come on. No. My Toronto? No. He was home last night. I swear he was in bed. Toronto's thriving housing market is beginning to show signs of strain, particularly in a condo segment suddenly flooded with new listings. September data from Treb and research firm Urban Nation show a surge of units for sale. And they say this, the beginning of a weakening trend for condos. The beginning. Along with a sharp decline in rents, that's in spite of a boom in other segments, such as single-family homes in Canada's financial capital. You can't just be like, oh yeah, sales are down and we got this rising inventory of condos. It's the beginning of something bad. Just because you say it's the beginning doesn't mean it's the beginning. If this is the beginning, explain to me why we were flashing warning signs months ago. We literally did a podcast in May called Median Condo Prices in Toronto Dropped 10%, according to a study. But who's counting? I mean, who's keeping track of that? Then again, we did a podcast called Rock Bottom Real Estate Prices in April, and nobody listened to that either. Who listens? At least my grandma's got good investment advice. Active listings of condos in downtown Toronto hit a record at the end of September and were 215% higher than a year earlier, according to Urban Nation. That compares with just a 5.3% rise in total housing listings across the city during the month. The trend means, listen to this. This is a subtext to the overall stats that we just heard because they were included in this, which goes to show the strength of the freehold and the low-rise segment. But listen to this. The trend means condo prices in October will likely fall on an annual basis. Urban Nation President Sean Hildebrand said, demand is just not keeping up with new supply right now, he said. Well, it's nice of you to join us. But what I don't like that happens here with this extremes is like, it's just starting to happen. We thought it was great. It looked great, but now it's not. Is you flip-flop. It creates a culture of like jumping from one extreme to the other. Because this is what they say. The weakness suggests the rosy picture for real estate that emerged over the past few months may be overstated in a city that UBS Group AG says is among the world's most vulnerable to, quote, a sharp correction. Right? The problem is UBS is overstated too. Why do we have to jump from extreme to extreme? We thought it was good, but now the market is crumbling. No. We've seen this trend in the condo space for months, but because you are late to the party, all of a sudden you jump on the CMHC and the UBS bandwagon and say, well, you know what? We're going to see a 9 to 18% drop in prices. Come on. Come on. Even the next subtext, rarely down, right? Toronto condos have shown remarkable resilience, perhaps until now. Benchmark prices fell for a second straight month and are down 1.8% since May. That's not bad. It really isn't. Even as values for detached homes have surged over time. All of this talk of condos being bad, really, the joke is prices have not come down like they could, guys. They really haven't. They say this: downtown pain, according to real estate professionals, weakness is concentrated in the downtown core. A glut of units begin to form after the pandemic halted immigration and people left the city in search of more living space to work from home. And we've seen this trend. The ratio of sales to new listings for condos, so remember, for overall, including condos, it's at 54%, pushing a seller's market. If you took condos right out, you know that'd be over 60%. You see the supply strain in our city. But when we look at just downtown condos, would you want to hedge a guess on what the sales to new listing ratio is, knowing under 40% makes you in a buyer's market? Guys, I wouldn't have even guessed this. 24%. The lowest level since the early 1990s. You know what that is? That's not dropped prices. That is a leading indicator of dropping prices. That is a very, very strong buyer's market. And what's the reason? The reason, as they say, and as I've been saying, is rental demand. It's simply because of all the new construction completions and absolutely no new blood of tenants coming in. This was from a co-founder of the Real Estate Center, a management company. We're going to see people move to get cheaper rents. It's crazy slow. Another agent says, this is a broker from Brad Lamb's office, Beth O'Donoghue in Toronto. She said it's crazy slow. So much so is on the rental market, and it's inevitably trickling down to the retail market. Rental market leads to the retail market. Oh, Brad Lamb's got himself a smart one. Put some plastic wrap around this baby. Hey, look, it's been laminated. So funny. So stupid. O'Donoghue says it's not panicking selling, but rather people who have owned units for a long time, they've already made so much money. I mean, from my perspective, there is some panicking. I'm seeing panicking, right? The question is whether there's blood on the streets. And I don't think we're there yet, but we're definitely seeing panicking. Average condo resale prices remain above earlier levels, but analysts believe more declines are coming in the next few months. And I would agree. Right now, some investors are dumping their units below market value just to sell immediately. If that's not panic selling, how would you describe it? How would you define it? I love that it's 2 paragraphs down, but okay. People are pricing units below what they would have gotten even 2 months ago. And fun fact for y'all, it was already bad 2 months ago. It's just this article apparently didn't know that. And we're also seeing it not just in Toronto, guys. This is not a Toronto issue. I saw an article from Bloomberg this morning. In echo of Toronto, condos start flooding the market in Montreal. Oh, Montreal, that glamorous city is so much better than Toronto. Toronto's in a housing market bubble, right? We're in a bubble. Well, Montreal's doing much of the same. Montreal's seeing a flurry of condos being put up for sale, suggesting the city's housing boom may be fading as the effects of the pandemic start to bite. If you're in a city across Canada, maybe you're listening to our podcast, and it's busy, you got lots of condos, and maybe you haven't been affected by this yet, well, let Toronto, let Montreal, and places like Vancouver be a leading indicator. Forget these places. What about major cities in the U.S. and around the world? Guys, be careful about your condos. Be careful. This density, people are running from it. The new condo listings on the island of Montreal were up 72% in the third quarter, the biggest annual increase in 17 years. So let's talk for a second. All of these things got me thinking, right? This isn't a joke. This is serious. We don't joke on his show. It's a very serious show. Very serious. If we saw a 14% drop in rents in the rental market, right? And following that led to a condo market cost being driven down. Right? We're down 1.8% as we've seen in May. Maybe not to the same level, but could that mean the condo market will drive prices down in the freehold side? Could there be a lag? Or is the pull strong enough in the low-rise units that it won't be affected by condos? Interesting thought, right? There will come a time, though, when condos are a better deal than low-rise. Remember that. And if low-rise keep growing at these levels, these ridiculous levels, that will only speed up that process, that time when that happens. But in my opinion, this won't happen until 2021. That's in my mind. But it's up to you, right? It's up to you which housing type you choose. Don't be the guy who stands in line unsure if you're using plastic or paper bags. Be decisive. And then you're the guy that you sit there and you're like, well, this poor kid, he makes minimum wage. You're like, you choose. You pick which one. But we all know beggars can't be choosers. Nor do I want to be the one that's choosing your investment portfolio for you. All right, let's do some hot topics before we get into our last conversation talking about COVID. Well, Trudeau government recently survived a confidence vote in the Canadian Parliament. So Trudeau is singing his way to the bank, pun intended. And speaking of, this is a rough one, guys. This is a rough one. You know me, I grow my audience one controversial joke at a time. So hit the subscribe button for more. Speaking of libtards, this is a great poke because I've had a lot of people criticizing my criticism of the political world. But what's the difference between a plastic bag and a blue-haired girl? It takes a plastic bag thousands of years to break down, but blue-haired girls can have a breakdown in a second. Completely unrelated to the political side, but I thought that was a funny joke anyways. Okay. One of the things that is interesting, and as a last hoorah before we kind of move on, and hopefully we'll hear similar news from Toronto as well. There's an article I saw here. Mississauga residents could see 1% property tax increase, higher user fees in 2021 as city tends to COVID-19 deficit. If you just read that article, you would think, well, that's not good. I got an increase of 1% on my property tax bill? Really? Well, you would be you got to remember where we came a few months ago, guys. Remember, Mississauga was a prime example of what we could see as double-digit, maybe even 20% property tax increases. So if we're talking 1%, what that means is though we criticize the governments, which is just fun and easy, they really did bail out municipalities. Clearly, Mississauga has been bailed out and Toronto will be much of the same. This is a good thing. This is a good thing. Until we have to pay the bill. Liberal government working on new rent relief program for business. Also a good thing. Thank you, Liberal government, because the program you initially made was garbage. Here's what they say. Program will subsidize rent for businesses without putting the onus on commercial landlords to request that help. And so here's what happened. We had this program called the Canada Emergency Commercial Rent Assistance Program. And I think it was kind of to balance both sides. We wanted to put the onus on the landlords. The landlords are going to be able to sign up for this program and therefore the tenants could get the subsidy. But if the plan was to help the tenants, you got to strong arm them. That's what we really learned. And so this is obviously just in time for COVID because this has been going on and it just expired last month. And so they're looking to recreate that program, which is a good thing. I think it's a little bit late, but better late than never. Meanwhile, feds in Ontario ante up millions to produce electric vehicles at Ford's Oakville plant. Great news for Oakville residents. And for Toronto and Peel schools, they now have permission to dismiss class if there's a case of COVID-19. Man, I don't know about you guys, but I would think there's got to be conversations in the school saying, who's taking one for the team? I hope there aren't any kids listening to this podcast, all right? But we're all sad that the international doors are closed. We are. I mean, I can't visit some of these amazing countries on my plastic bucket list, right? We got China, we got Hawaii. This place would be great. Or that plastic island the size of Australia in the middle of the ocean. But what about locally? Will the second wave affect us here in Toronto? Well, I want to start talking about this as our last and final topic. TorontoStories.com. How will the second wave of the pandemic affect Toronto real estate? They say this, the question is, how will a second wave of the pandemic this fall and winter affect people's desire and ability to buy homes? And this is the conversation. They say this, although open houses were allowed under phase 3 of Ontario's reopening plan, the Toronto Real Estate Board strongly recommended caution. I mean, I canceled open houses as soon as COVID started, so at least we're all on the same page here. The first thing that comes to mind on a daily basis, according to Patel, is that we are essential workers and we must make sure everyone is safe. That's why she's president and I'm not, right? She's nicer than I am. The first thing that comes to my mind is who the hell wants to do an open house anyways? Those things ain't no fun. I mean, if you're a new agent and you want to steal prospects, but that just makes the user experience that much greater when you go to look at properties. DeVell Morrison, a real estate broker at Bosley Real Estate Brokerage, says the rising number of GTA in the GTA have not changed how homes change hands. And he says this, we have been working with pretty strict protocols since March and April. And so this includes virtual tours, masks, sanitizer when visiting a property, not touching anything in the home or using the bathroom in appointment only showings. I've had ones with tenants where they say, put on these cute little slippers. Take a selfie with your slipper. But you guys will remember, I was one of the early people saying, I don't think like virtual tours was such a big thing, virtual showings, virtual open houses. I said from the beginning, they won't replace real showings. And that's what we're seeing. I told you, but maybe it's just me, right? Maybe I'm a 29-year-old man who can't embrace the future. Bradley, get with the times. Plastic knives are redundant. They simply aren't cutting it anymore. And the funny thing is our industry is just a bunch of old farts. and young pretty farts, or old farts using pictures of when they were young pretty farts. Morrison says the rising numbers of the second wave do not seem to have spooked prospective buyers. The part you're missing here is that I don't have a problem with going in your house. I'm going to have a mask on. I'm going to have gloves on. I ain't going to touch nothing. It's like a wax museum. But I don't want 100 dirty up people with their fingers on everything walking through my property. That's the problem. That is probably why you're seeing a sales to new listing ratio that's going off the charts. TREB figures show that even after a summer on fire, the overall real estate market continues to be strong. Even the condo segment, while having bigger problems than the single family one, continues to see momentum and price gains, Patel says. I'm glad to say Patel says because we just proved that wrong, but we'll give her a pass. I mean, she's only the president of TREB. There's nothing wrong with the condo space. And then they got this little conversation at the here. Condo conundrum. The pressure on condos is from the rental market. Imagine if it was from, in my opinion, the rental market and immigration. One of the things they mention here is why is the condo market beat up? There's no tourism, weddings, sporting events to stimulate the Airbnb rentals, right? And immigration, when they first arrive, they don't just buy a place. They aim to buy a property, go into rental space. But could you imagine if that immigration that's been mostly cut off were to want to purchase properties as soon as they land? There's some, but if the majority did, how much more pressure would our condo space be under? So thank your happy, I don't know, whatever you think. Thank the chicken gods. Thank Yahweh. Canada to open borders to international students from October 20th. So the border, this was a fun article I saw from thepienews.com. The border is open effective October 20th to institutions that are studying and have a COVID-19 readiness plan approved by their local, provincial, or territorial government. Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada has announced. So we're trying to get more immigration because that is really stirring the pot. And then here's another quote. If they bought 10 years ago for about $150,000, their mortgage payments are small. They can ride out even a few years of lower rent. People who bought resale 2 to 3 years ago may be feeling the heat. Not everyone is being treated equally. And they say this, they could sell, they could drop their rent. And both of these actions exacerbate the down. I never know how to say it. I say exacerbate, but there's definitely no T in there. The downward pressure on prices. They do. And these are the panic sellers that we were talking about earlier in the show. Okay. Rental picture looks pretty much like it did a first wave. Got it. The fact that some landlords are not getting rent for a small percentage of tenants, the fact that Ontario has passed a freeze rent, all of these things, the pressures, as they say here, if I were to summarize it, the pressures are on the small time investor. Because listen to this, for larger landlords, there have been discussions about how to balance reduced income with the costs associated with running buildings. And some members of FRPO are talking about, for instance, delaying some improvements. He said the builders are taking a look at whether plans to build still make sense. So therefore, from what I'm hearing here, is expect poor housing conditions for renters because they're not going to reduce your rent. And funny thing is these larger projects, their rent rates aren't coming down anyways. It's the little investors who are. But you're going to have the living conditions dropping in response and combined with rising prices, right? When supply isn't enough to meet the demand on the other side, it seems that owning a rental unit right now is not worth it. I know many of you are sitting on these units. You're like, this is not worth it. But guys, after COVID, both the rental market and the housing market will be set to experience their largest growth ever. They will. When these pressures go away. Our FRPO released a report this summer, and they suggest Ontario is facing a shortage of 200,000 rental units over the next decade. Meanwhile, some landlords are dropping their units. It's kind of crazy. It's low-key crazy. So here's the perfect storm. With condos, people are looking for work from home space, or they're wanting to upsize. And on the other hand, not as many sellers are in a hurry. And we've got owner-occupied condo owners can just sit on their properties for the most part, the ones that haven't just bought their unit. And because the number of COVID-19 cases in the long-term care homes, some older people are choosing not to sell, or people are thinking multi-generationally. We got to be careful because this is going to be a bit of a whiplash. It really will. Hopefully you guys learned some stuff. I know today was very heavy on what's going on in the market. We'll go back to our normal schedule another time. If you missed our last podcast, I had a guest, a very good friend of mine back from uni days, and we were talking about taxes and the risks that are going to face investors. If you're considering investing in the real estate market at all, you definitely don't want to miss that. You're going to learn some good stuff, but I'm going to leave it here. Martin Luther had a dream, and so does Justin Trudeau. I don't know about you, but I'm looking forward to better days with paper water boxes. Let's face it though, plastic straws, they suck, okay? But they won't hurt your family. It's like he's building this up way too much. The key difference between a plastic bag and the notoriously dangerous Michael Jackson is one is made of plastic and a danger to children, and the other holds your groceries, or at least it will until the end of 2021. I'm going to leave it there. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. Make sure you get on our investor list if you want to get access to off-market awesome deals. Awesome deals. I wouldn't be sending them to you if they weren't awesome. In fact, one that I sent the other day, my understanding is they had like 5 offers come in on that property. No wonder. If you took out the property management fee, you're talking like $800 a month positive cash flow. Even with it, we're talking $500 a month. Not too shabby. 15 plus return. I think that one's 17% returns. Anyways, we're looking at great deals and we're sharing with you, our family and friends out there in the real estate world. I'll see you guys next time. Take care and keep it real.